Hey everyone, what is up? Welcome back to my Higurashi When They Cry Let's Play. Today we'll be recording episode 28, and this is, hot off the heels of one of the biggest episodes of Higurashi yet, in my opinion, right? Um, this is actually my second time recording this intro. The first time I just said, it was a big episode, and I'm like, that was like the understatement, like of the biggest understatement probably of this entire LP, right? But seriously, I mean, we watched Keichi formulate and then actually execute a plan to kill Teppei Hojo, right? Start to finish. Um, and I mean, like, this is just different than anything we've ever seen from Keiichi, right? And I think that kind of goes without saying, right? Like, we've actually seen Keiichi kill before in chapter one, right? But that wasn't premeditated, right? It's a whole different beast when it's premeditated, right? Like, this wasn't an act of fear. This wasn't an act like, in the moment, right? This was like I'm gonna kill him, and he did, right? And he went and killed him, right? It was insane to watch. Pretty simple to summarize, honestly. The murder itself, right? I mean, like, I could go over all the details, but that's not super duper important right now. But the big things are he kind of got sloppy at the end, right? Right at the end, like that, the grave he dug for Teppei there at the end, because of how far he ran away, he had to dig him another one. But he didn't have the energy to bring him all the way back, right? And he didn't have the energy to keep digging that grave. So he dug a really shallow grave, right, for Teppei, and that could come back to bite him. Also, he runs into Takano, right? Because of how exhausted he is, he couldn't even like avoid her or something, right? He just like collapsed on his bike in the middle of the road, and she ended up like letting him in the car and whatnot. And it was pretty clear that she got a pretty good idea of what Keiichi had just done, right? And as we drove home and got out, or as she drove us home, and we got out of the car, it became even more clear that she had done the exact same thing that we had just done, right? And more than likely, in my opinion, she killed Tomatake, right? Which is wild, right? And could kind of transform how we need to look at chapters one and two. Um, Especially because there was still a body found in that oil drum, and if it's Takano, right? I don't know. But I think the big thing there too was they kind of had a mutual agreement that neither of them saw each other that night, right? Um, and so they're just going to, for now, go on about their lives in theory, um, which is interesting. But here's the thing: I think they both probably want to kill the other to ensure their silence. Keiichi certainly wants to kill Takano. He got a taste of murdering someone, and unfortunately, his whole idea of I do this one time, then it's back to normal, it's already shot, to be honest. Right? Because I mean, like when he is in the act of killing, he's like, "Wow, I'm pretty good at this," right? And then afterwards, now he's like, "I should have killed Takano. I should still kill Takano," right? And I'm like, I don't think this is going to be it for Keiichi, right? And like I said, he got sloppy. It seems like they probably already know that Teppei is missing, and I think he'll probably end up the prime suspect. And unless there's another level to Keiichi that's about to show up that we've never seen, I don't think he can weasel his way out of this. Right? Oishi is not going to let that happen. And so I think he's fried. But I think the best way to actually figure that out is to just continue. Right? So let's go ahead and continue on into chapter 11, chapter 3. We got to be reaching the end game now. Maybe not like literally this episode, but we're getting there. At first, I thought it was a dream. I was staring at this strange sheet, not really understanding what it was. That was all. I didn't go after it, nor did I ridicule it. The fact was that the boring view was the ceiling of my own room, but I didn't realize that for a fairly long time. Yes, I thought I had been dreaming. but I had actually been staring at the ceiling the whole time. Lethargy induced by the voices of the cicadas. Even after I realized I was awake, I couldn't draw forth the energy to sit up. Everything I could see, everything I could hear, everything was like a television broadcast that had already ended. It was hot. So hot I could choke on the heat. My back was moist with night sweats, and it felt gross. Unable to endure it any longer, I tossed my futon, and finally, blood started coursing through my brain. I lazily recalled the long day I had yesterday. Oh yeah, that's one way to put it. The reality, as I lay here listening to the voices of the cicadas, and yesterday, so different from it. In order to kill Satoko's uncle, I had rehearsed, formulated a plan, and dug a hole. It was very hot. I was tired, wasn't I? And when evening came, I went to school and called him out on the phone. I panicked for a moment when he asked where the police station was, but it worked out. And then I awaited him and swooped down. I couldn't remember any more what sort of emotions I'd let control my body. In any case, it didn't go smoothly, but I did it. It was very hard to dig the hole for the body. That feel of the rain pelting down on me. I don't think I'll ever forget it. The rain, the mud, and the sprays of blood. The sensation of floundering in a swamp. When I met Takano-san on the way home, that wasn't good, no matter how I interpreted it. It was the most misfortunate and uncalculated thing that had happened that night. Everything would have been perfect, if only I hadn't encountered her. Ha! I was just riding my bike with my shovel in one hand through the downpour, utterly soaked. There was no way someone could surmise I was a murderer burying a body just from that information. Now that I was thinking calmly, napping under the morning sun, that's what I thought. Dude. Still, the more I think about Takano-san's eyes, it seemed like she understood. Takano-san, she knew. That I'd killed someone. Them randomly doing this thing where they like space it out, I can't tell if that's just like some big emphasis or if that is like, I don't know, indicative of him like hearing a voice almost or something. That might be an overreaction. So again, I'm not going to look too deep into it, but sometimes when you see different formats for like text, you got to wonder, does it actually mean it's someone else talking? Takano-san, she knew that I'd killed someone, buried them, and that I'd been on my way home, exhausted. Takano-san wouldn't gain anything from selling me out to the police, but that didn't mean I could feel at ease. I had crossed such a bridge to get my tranquil life back, and I'd finally achieved it as a result. But now, for the rest of my life, for all the tranquil days starting today, I'd have to live in fear of when they could suddenly end. I may have twisted my ankle, dulled from total exhaustion. The fact that I couldn't make the snap judgment I needed to, I regretted it more and more as time went on. You didn't have a choice, Keichi Maibara. You didn't have any choice at the time. You were tired. You were a mess. Even if you had made the decision, you might not have even been able to kill her. She might have just beaten you instead. In that sense, parting ways uneventfully could have been the safer option. I would say so. No matter how sharp Takano-san's intuition was, she had no proof. Her suspecting me didn't amount to evidence by itself.
理屈じゃわかってるさ。でも、だからって何の心配もないってわけじゃないだろ。
Correct. Just worry about it when the time comes. Now isn't the time to be worrying. It's the time to be smiling, right? You accomplished so much just to gain a new life starting today, didn't you? Then you should be happy at this new morning. If remembering the past is too hard for you, then just consider everything up to yesterday as having never happened. You said so yourself. You'd bury it all like it never happened. Well, your wish came true. Everything before yesterday never happened. So be happy, Keichi Maibara.
Why?
I stuck up my hands lazily. This shifting to like that 1 week, or like from that 1 week to everything before yesterday is kind of wild, because that implies like forgetting all the good times that he had. I guess, you know, when you do something like that, it's a permanent change in your life though, so, right, and who you are. So it wouldn't really shock me if he's like almost considering that a different person, right? Felt a little silly for me to be the one doing it. I heaved a sigh from deep in my belly. That sigh got my lungs moving. Felt like I hadn't been breathing until just now. It wasn't enough to admonish myself over. All the dice that could be thrown already had been, and the numbers that turned up weren't bad at all. If I lost with those numbers, then I'd just have to give up, I guess. I grabbed the chest of my pajamas and flapped it back and forth. Cool air flowed over my sweating body. Okay. Nothing before yesterday happened. Nothing. Nothing at all. I'd forget it all. Yesterday was all a dream. What time was it? About midday? Getting myself up and going to school this late seemed kind of absurd, but I needed to go. I felt like going to school would be the first step into my peaceful new life. I didn't care how late it was, I would go. I'd go to school right now and get back to the life I'd retaken as soon as I could. My lazy body immediately became lighter at the thought. I rolled up out of the futon, bounced onto my knees, then leaped upright.
10.0
I stuck out my chest with pride at my gymnast-like pose, then took a deep breath of fresh air. The brisk morning air had been gone for a while, replaced by the crisp air of summer. Downstairs, I got a stern talking to by my mother. Where were you last night? When did you get back? You need to tell me when you won't be home for dinner. Things like that. But considering the importance of what I'd accomplished yesterday, a little scolding was no problem. In fact, it even felt like the sort of thing that would happen in such a peaceful life. I listened with an irresponsible smile and stepped out into the sun high overhead. It was around the time lunch break would be ending. Everyone would probably be worrying about me. I didn't go to the festival, and now I wasn't at school. Well, maybe they weren't too worried about it. Since they would have gotten a small piece of news, but a happy one, from Satoko today. Yes, the small piece of news that her uncle hadn't come home last night. Satoko would probably live her days in nervous tension for a while, thinking he might still come home. But eventually those days would end. And finally, Satoko too would realize her uncle was never coming back. And then, Rika-chan would quietly invite her. She would say, "You can live with me again," and everything would be back to normal. Our lives would go back to how they were before that man appeared. Satoko would start wearing that extraordinary smile, complete with those protruding canines, and fool everyone with those traps she was so proud of. I can't help but feel like even going there, it's not going to be nearly the atmosphere he wants it to be. Like, I don't know, at least today. I'd probably be her first target out of everyone, but I wouldn't be mad. In fact, I might actually shed tears of joy at the return of something so normal. Satoko. She'd gradually grow back into that meddlesome personality of hers. I mean, my lack of useful life skills was already completely exposed. I wonder if I'd ever be a match for Satoko, but that would be such a pleasant thing to see too. I can't help but worry that Satoko is just going to be gone. Whether it's because, welfare officers got her, or, she somehow got murdered. It was such warm, fuzzy predictions. I didn't feel bad for going to school so late. In fact, I wanted to run there now to get there as soon as I could. Instead, I decided to savor the peacefulness of just going to school like normal, without running. The world I'd obtained for myself. That gave me joy just by walking like this. Yes, the world beginning on this very day was something I had won. Without that monumental feat yesterday, I would never have been able to come to school so cheerfully today. The school gate came into sight. Just then I heard the principal ringing the bell to mark the end of lunch break. It was a clear, refreshing sound. I stopped despite myself, and let myself take it in. Tap. I'd stopped suddenly, so there was an extra footstep. With a noise, the blessedness I was feeling throughout my whole body withdrew into any pore it could find, and as if to replace it, I felt like hundreds of hairy caterpillars were climbing up my feet. I turned back, but of course, nobody was there. A single footstep could have easily been my imagination, but the footstep felt so ominous. The question is, what are these footsteps that he's hearing? Is he actually being followed, or is this, paranoia, or is this something supernatural, right? I mean, I think it's basically got to be one of the three. That extra footstep I had heard after seeing Takano-san off last night. With everything that happened on that insane night, I didn't mind something like that happening once. It had been a hell of a night, after all. In fact, having just one hallucination was pretty fortunate. But those footsteps should have ended with yesterday. So if I heard them again today, there was really only one thing it could have meant. Last night still wasn't over. It was still going. Still. That insane night. Forever. The step I heard, just that one extra footstep, was quietly ridiculing the nonsensical notion that the world starting today was completely different from the one that ended yesterday. My classmates playing in the schoolyard all vanished inside like the tide going out. When I approached the school, it felt like that warm, fuzzy scene had ended, and it didn't feel good. At the entrance, I took a quick look in everyone's shoeboxes. Satoko Hojo, she was here. Mion was here too, and Rena, of course. Even Rika-chan was here. Tomita-kun and Okamura-kun were here. In fact, I didn't see any missing classmates. If there were shoes missing, they would have to be my own. I took my shoes off and stuck them in, and took out some slippers. There wasn't a single pair left in the shoeboxes anymore. With that, they returned to their rightful state. But as I stepped up onto the wooden floor, I noticed there was just one pair of slippers left. Huh? Whose?
Hojo Satoshi.
Satoshi, who had never been to school since, disappearing last year. Until now, we had committed the exact same act of violence, but I guess in the very end it went differently. Oh, we'll see in the very end. You couldn't make it to school, but here I am. I didn't repeat the same mistake you made. I wasn't about to let myself feel superior about that. In fact, I felt an odd sense of familiarity with him. A misfortunate bond with someone I'd never met due to following the same fate. I headed down the hallway towards the usual classroom. Felt like it had been a whole year since coming here. Hey, did you forget Keichi Maibara? Satoshi Hojo didn't really disappear on the night of Watanagashi, did he? Satoshi Hojo disappeared a few days later. On Satoko's birthday, if I was right. I didn't know what day it was, but I couldn't say for sure I'd avoided Satoshi's failure unless I remained here past that day. I don't think you will, bro. GG. I was still living in that night of insanity. The teacher still hadn't come to the classroom. The other door clattered open, the one the teacher wouldn't use, so everyone turned at once to see who had arrived. Everyone looked pretty vacant. Suppose I'll greet them.
Ohayo, Shokun. 出迎えご苦労であるぞよ。
Silence. When I started to think I'd fallen flat, someone finally started laughing for me. Least forced laugh.
おはよう、ケイちゃん。今朝も飛ばしてるね。飛ばしてるね。ケイチくん、まだお祭り気分が抜けてないのかもしれない。
Hearing Mio and Rena's cheerful voices made me realize how dumb those dark feelings I'd been having at the entrance really were.
おいおい、お祭り気分って、そもそも俺。
At the festival at all, remember? Before I could say that, Rika-chan smiled at me.
ケイチはちゃんと僕の演舞見ててくれましたですか？ちゃんと見てたよ。あんなにいっぱい拍手してくれてたのに、リカちゃん気づかなかったのかな？
Okay, so they're covering for him.
ケイちゃんにシオンのやつがちょっかい出してきたのを無視してね。
I'm starting to wonder the possibility that they're being serious, though. Like, actually, though. Like, I think they're just covering for him, but given how mysterious things have been with, like, people that shouldn't be there, right? People that shouldn't exist, I gotta wonder.
シオン、ざまあなかった。ああ、いい気分。
Mion starts laughing at the memory. She slaps me a few times in the back.
それで、あの射的屋の対決って、結局どうなったんですか？
Tomita-kun was facing me and talking. There was nobody behind me. That meant he was talking to me?
あれは結局、富田家がビリだったのですよ。みんなで楽しく罰ゲームをしましたです。リカちゃんも実質ビリみたいなもんだったじゃない。あそこで起死回生の大技でガムをゲットとは、さすがは我が部の部員。
So this is the exact same as the original shooting game.
見事だったよ。
Crying at a time like that is a feat only Furude would be allowed to do, said Okamura-kun, breathing heavily from his nose. In my direction, everyone laughed. If anyone but Rika-chan had done it, it would have been against the rules. Rika-chan gave one of her nipa smiles as she listened to it. In my direction. Rena too turned to me, no, towards me. And then, with a somewhat embarrassed smile, she whispered to me so only I could hear.
でも、本当にありがとね、ケイチくん。
もう、何がだよ。
あのでっかいぬいぐるみ、すっごく嬉しかった。
Okay, dude, this is like... This is starting to get weird. Like, they legit all seem to actually remember him being there right now. I don't know if this is the most elite cover job ever, or...
大事に枕元に置いてるんだよ。ちゃんと寝る前にお休みのキスしちゃった。
The class laughed at that, cheering and jeering. This whole time, the conversation had been a little bit off. I wasn't quite getting it.
ぬいぐるみが、どうしたって？
どうしたって、昨日のお祭りでみんなで頑張って落としたよ。でっかいぬいぐるみ。でっかいぬいぐるみ。
Rena seemed taken aback, but when she answered, she did it with a smile.
なかなか倒せないから機体を狙ったり素早く何発も撃ったりしていろいろと試したんだよね。それでケイチくん鉄砲を何丁もあらかじめ用意して素早く撃ってみせてくれたんだよね。かっこよかった。はう。
So the details still perfectly match what happened in, I believe that was chapter 1. It could have been chapter 2. I don't actually remember which chapter it was, but either way, the details match. The details match. Wait. Who was this?
あの後の飲み会でさ、町内会の会長連中にもケイちゃんの評判すごく良かったんだよ。ケイちゃんの売り工場に惚れたって騒いでたのは子供会の君吉徳蔵会長だったかな。次の祭りではぜひケイちゃんに何店舗か任せたいって言ってた。徳蔵はお祭りの実行委員会の模擬店部長さんなのです。
Maibara-san is great at making things sound good. Oh my goodness, Maibara-san is great at making things sound good, isn't he? Yep, whenever he talks about something, it seems a lot better than it actually is. You can't say that.
ケイチくんって売り子さんの才能があるんだね。
Yeah, no kidding, that's actually true.
きっとバナナの叩き売りとかやったら上手だと思うよ。
さっきから何の話だよ。だいたい俺。
Didn't go to the festival in the first place. I swallowed those words. I didn't know exactly why, but in Hinamizawa, this is what had happened. Yesterday, during the Watanagashi festival, Keichi Maibara had appeared, and he had romped about with all the usual members of his club. He made a big scene at a few of the stalls, snatched a few sticks of takoyaki and okonomiyaki, not the city, okonomiyaki, in his glee, rating each of them as delicious or terrible to get everyone excited. And they'd seen a gigantic stuffed animal at the target practice game, and everyone went after it. And then I got a whole bunch of the court guns, firing them in rapid succession, throwing each one away after using it. And admirably, I shot down the biggest stuffed animal there. And then I gave the stuffed animal, the proof of my victory, to Rena as a gift. Then our fun came to a close as we had to go see Rika-chan's offertory dance. There was a ton of people squeezed in there, and we all got separated, but we each managed to get into good positions to cheer Rika-chan on from. Then, in the middle, when Shion came up and asked me to go hang out with her instead of watching the dedication dance, I refused, and stayed put, watching the dance until the very end. Okay, so that mirrors Chapter 2. That mirrors Chapter 2. I don't remember if the shooting game was actually Chapter 2, or if they have now combined Chapter 1 and 2's Watanagashi. That is something I will need to check. Maybe not right this instant, but something I need to figure out. Because this is strange. But who? Who was that? Well, everyone's been saying it, haven't they? Keichi Maibara. I had an urge to yell in anger at my classmates for having so much fun talking about the festival yesterday with Keichi Maibara. What the hell are you guys even talking about? Far stronger than that feeling, though, was the sheer uncanny nature of this reality I couldn't understand. A Keichi Maibara who wasn't me was in Hinamizawa yesterday. As I threw away my humanity, turned into a demon, and was busy beating Satoko's uncle to death. I was having a great time at the festival last night. What the hell? I had to suffer through so much, desperately holding back tears, getting so worn out in that downpour, digging holes, chasing, beating, killing, dragging, and burying. Who was this Keichi Maibara who had ignored me so and spent such a fun, carefree time at the festival, damn it? Who the hell stood in for me as I put my life on the line working so hard to achieve this treasure-like everyday life? If there was another Keichi Maibara beside me, then what was I? On the night of Watsunagashi, where one died and one disappeared, in accordance with the Yashiro-sama's curse, there was only a demon who had killed someone. Dumbfounded as I succumbed to a horrifying possibility, I looked around at my classmates to make sure there was nobody extra I didn't recognize among them. To make sure I wasn't among them. It was a horrifying thought that the real Keiichi Maibara hadn't overslept and had come to school on time, and that I, who was no longer Keiichi Maibara, had just waltzed in here. But no matter how much I checked, the only people here were ones I knew. Okay, this is strange. The man I met every time I looked in a bathroom mirror was not here.
はい。午後の授業を始めますよ。皆さん、席、委員長、号令。
The teacher entered and everyone hurried back to their seats. Upon finding me, who was so stupidly late, she gave me a stern talking to, but I wasn't listening to it. Wasn't our old life supposed to start today? Something wasn't right. It was just strange. I was supposed to go back to my old fun life after yesterday. I'd set foot in an incomparably mysterious world that was completely different from both my old life and my recent one. Yes, this was, without a doubt, a different world than the one I'd been living in until now. There was no way such an absurd thing could be possible. But unless it was true, I couldn't explain anything that just happened. In this classroom, I was surrounded by so many faces I knew, and yet I felt isolated. The cicadas sounded no different than they had before now, but they seemed somehow false. The air was parched and dry, too, making me think, was the air in Hinamizawa always this uncomfortable?
Oi, Lena.
何かな？授業中なんだよ。
昨日の祭りだけどさ、俺、いつ頃みんなと合流したっけ？
To be honest, I was pretty excited afterwards, and I gobbled down some cans of beer. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, but I don't quite remember some things. For random babbling, it wasn't a bad excuse.
ケイチ君、最初は来れないって言ってたんだよね。みーちゃんの家にそう電話したんでしょ？
Right. That matched. I called Mion and told her to take Satoko into my place since I wouldn't be able to meet up with them due to things I had to do. Okay, so... that means, like, I'm taking the possibility... oh, excuse me. I'm taking the possibility of, like, a different world, like, actually kind of serious right now. Because things match up too well with the chapters we've already seen for me to think that's a pure coincidence. Or, well, more like to think that it has to be coincidence, right? I don't think it just has to be coincidence, right? I'm like, could there be something to that? But if they remember that, it's not like there was some, like, very clear, like, everything in the past was actually Chapter 1, and, like, Chapter 3, Keiichi somehow ended up back in Chapter 1 or something, right? Like, or Chapter 2, whatever, right? Like, that didn't happen. I called Mion. I told her to take Satoko into my place, since I wouldn't be able to meet up with them due to the things I had to do.
さとこちゃんを誘ってあげようっていうのは、みんなでお祭りの準備をしてた時に決めたんだよ。少しでも、おじさんの姿の見えないところに連れ出してあげようと思って。
That was the same too. Mion said that when I called her, that everyone had already decided to invite her.
それでみんなで
レナとミーちゃんとリカちゃんでサトコちゃんの家に行ってサトコちゃんを連れ出して、サトコちゃんのおじさんすっごく意地悪そうな人だった。
Right. That part didn't matter. What I was trying to ask was...
俺は、いつ合流したんだ？
そんなことも忘れちゃってるの？ケイチくん、だから祭りの前の日はよく寝た方がいいよって言ったのに。
だから、俺はいつ合流したんだよ。
At my sudden threatening demand, Rena was at a loss for words. Yeah, you might want to chill out, bro. Oops, I shouldn't have rushed that. I told her I was sorry.
境内でだよ。ひょっこりとリカちゃんと話してたじゃない。
ミコさん姿のリカちゃんと楽しそうに話してた。それでレナも加わって「はう、お持ち帰り」って。
Yeah, this sounds exactly like like one of the past Watanagashis, right? Like everything lines up, even when he gets there, right? Like this is how it, like that's what happened. I'm almost positive. We're gonna have a lot to review.
リカちゃんと話してたのか？
We're just probably gonna play this chapter out, and at the end of chapter 3, we're gonna have some things to look for.
ケイちゃん、用事か何かがあったんじゃないって私が聞いたらさ、ケイちゃん、胸を叩きながら自分で言ったじゃないのよ。用事なんかより祭りで大暴れする方が大切だぜって。
I didn't say that. I never said anything like that. I never even went to the shrine grounds yesterday to begin with. I never had the time to stop by a place like that. I went to dig the hole as soon as I woke up. I had a pretty hard time doing it. After that, I snuck into the school and made a call. I called him out and lay in wait. And then it started raining really hard. With that kind of downpour, the festival should have come to a halt. Oh, wait, that's a good point. In other words, it ended then. From the time the festival started to when it ended, it would have been impossible for me to have swung by the shrine grounds. I was already there when Mion and the others dragged Satoko out and brought her to the shrine, and I was talking to Rika-chan. I'm surprised not one of them has mentioned the downpour yet. Then, where would Rika-chan say we met? The teacher went out to wash her hands, so I ran over to Rika-chan's desk and asked her directly.
ケイチとですか？
あ、リカちゃんはミオンたちが来る前から俺と話してたんだろ？いつ俺に会ったんだ？いつどこでだよ？
ケイチが何を聞きたいのか。
俺昨日寝不足で半分頭がぼーっとなっててさ、何も覚えてないんだよ。
It looked like Rika-chan bought into my babbling.
ケイチと会ったのは集会所から村長さんたちと出てきた時なのです。ケイチは西宮殿の扉の前にいましたのですよ。
え、何？西宮殿？
I'd never heard of a building called that before. Or maybe I have, but at the very least I wouldn't know where on the shrine grounds it was.
村長さんがそこは神聖な場所だからみだりに近寄ってはならにゅうと怒りましたですよ。ケイチ、それも忘れてしまいましたですか？
I was too scared to ask anymore. The more I asked, the more it became clear without any doubt that Keichi Maibara was present at the Furude Shrine grounds during the Watanagashi festival. Now that's a funny place to have found him, if I do say so myself. In front of the ritual implement storehouse? That's a really interesting spot to be. The clearer that became, the more doubts, no, fears I had. Who on earth was I yesterday? Whoever that was, he had a good time in my place, and managed to go the entire day without letting them notice I wasn't here. Wasn't there. Oh right. When did that person leave everyone? This morning, my mother got mad at me for having stayed out so late last night, which meant at the very least, that Keiichi Maibara hadn't come home while my mother was still awake. The festival would have been closed because of the downpour. If I recall right, when I went back to the house's storage room to get another shovel, I think the clock said 7. Since it was already raining hard by then, the festival would have had to close down before 7. If I'd returned that early, I would have definitely run into my parents. Or at the very least, they wouldn't have asked me when I got back last night. So the Keichi Maibara from yesterday, that meant he never went home. That meant the downpour happened, the festival was broken up, everyone left. But he didn't go back to the house. That means... When I arrived at the natural conclusion, a wicked chill suddenly froze my spine, climbed up to my brain. That meant Keiichi Maibara was the same as Satoshi. One day, he never went home. On the night of Watanagashi, he never went home. The downpour interrupted the festival, and on the way home, he suddenly disappeared. And I, who was dealing with the corpse, went home without a problem. I was so tired I wasn't even hungry, so I went up to my room without a sound and crawled into my futon. Who was I? That much was obvious. Keiichi Maibara. Keiichi Maibara was me. There may have been another one, but that doesn't negate the fact that I was Keiichi Maibara. Then, that other Keiichi Maibara was... what? This is... dude, this is wild. I can't say this is completely shocking, because this kind of already lines up with what we saw in Chapter 2. And it kind of makes me wonder if it lines up with Chapter 1 as well. Like, right now in my head, I'm like, okay, so... in Chapter 2, we saw 24 hours, right? There was like a 24-hour difference between the time that they found that a certain corpse was dead and between sightings of that human, right? So I'm like, okay, clearly someone, like, this is clearly, like, pretty ridiculous, right? I still haven't figured out exactly what it means. Does it mean someone is playing, like, masterful disguises, right? Are we somehow cloning people? Are we somehow talking, like, soul transfer, right? Are we talking, like, time shenanigans? Dude, I don't know. I don't know right now, right? But something is up, right? And whether that can be explained with the supernatural or the natural, right? Something is up, right? And I will point out that if we think this is not supernatural, right, then I think the only real explanation is that somehow the Sonozakis are, like, masters of disguise or something, right? Or even if we're assuming this is supernatural and not, like, time shenanigans, right? If we think, like, something weird, like, they made a clone or transferred a soul or something, right? Which I'm like, seems a little ridiculous, but, like, the point is, you would need inside knowledge for a lot of this, right? And so I think the fact that Mion probably knew what we were doing should be suspicious, right? Is Mion somehow, like, in the Sonozakis, are they somehow to do with these sightings of people who shouldn't be there? It's possible. I don't know. For now, we're just going to keep moving on, see if we can get any more information about this. Because this is just wild, right? I mean, this is like the 24-hour thing from Chapter 2, except it's Keiichi now, whose appearances aren't lining up. The voices of the cicadas, steadily filling the classroom, were beginning to bother me. Suddenly, I laid eyes on Satoko. Satoko's expression was dark as always. She seemed completely exhausted. Had a life of agony she couldn't even imagine an ending to. Are things even better for her? What had last night been like for Satoko? Did she have fun with everyone and feel a little happier, if even for a moment? And when she went home, the end of her dream, she'd probably gone to sleep afraid of when her uncle would return. And then, this morning, her uncle hadn't come home. And then she went to school. Right now, she must have been still trapped by the rotten idea from which she couldn't be saved. Their uncle would need her when she got back. My fear is that we're going to find out that he's still alive, right? That's my fear. But you can rest easy, Satoko. Your uncle won't ever be coming back. I couldn't tell her it was because I'd killed him. When Satoko realized on her own that her uncle would never return, and that would truly be the end of the long, insane night. That's right, I didn't do anything wrong. I did the best possible thing I could have as Satoko's Nini. Not an atom in my body regretted it. And look, calm down and think, Keichi Maibara. From a certain point of view, isn't it convenient there was another Keiichi Maibara? I buried the corpse perfectly. A beginning wouldn't happen. But if worst came to worst and it got out and the investigation got to me, I had a strong alibi, able to profess the fact that I'd been at the Watanagashi festival. But accepting something so creepy and using it as an alibi. Still, if I proved I hadn't gone to the festival yesterday, it would do no good and a whole lot of harm. That was what left the really, actually bad aftertaste. You'll forget about it, Keiichi Maibara. Everything that happened before today. So just forget about the Keiichi Maibara who was there yesterday, too. Instead, let's watch gently over Satoko for the day her smile returns, and the day that would mark the end of the insane, all too long night.
それでは今日はこれで終わりです。皆さん、寄り道をしないでちゃんとお家へ帰るんですよ。委員長、号令。
起立。挙礼。
Goodbye. I thought about many things, and saw my thoughts dispersed by many other things. I didn't know whether or not that time had been spent worrying or daydreaming, but either way, it came to an end along with the class. Cheerfully, our classmates got their things and ran for the hallway. Mio and Rena and Rika-chan were packing up as well. What about Satoko? This whole day, she seemed deflated. Well, her uncle may not have returned last night, but she wouldn't have known he'd never return. How much I wanted to express that fact to her. Satoko packed up her pencil box and math workbook messily, and after a dark glance at the clock, heaved a sigh, and went to leave the classroom. Then, suddenly, somebody placed a hand on her shoulder and stopped her.
何ですの？私、ちゃんと水やり当番もやりましたし、プリントだってちゃんと。
Her words, possessed by a persecution complex, hurt. I spoke loudly so everyone could hear.
なあみんな、さ、今日は久しぶりにやらないか、部活。
Satoko always had to tend to her uncle, so club has been on hiatus. In our minds, our club is proof of a calm, peaceful life. By enjoying being together, I wanted to make Satoko realize her days of darkness were over.
レナは、いいよ。
そりゃまあ私は構わないけど、さとこがいいならね。
Under a condition. That was important. With everything up to her, Satoko gave a worried look.
なあ、さとこ、久々にどうだよ。
I feel like she's gonna say no, right? And I feel like Keiichi's just not gonna take things well. I don't know, we'll see.
パーッとさ。
そのお気持ちは嬉しいでございますけど。
My uncle might already be home. Thus spoke her darkened eyes, her mouth unmoving.
さとこもさ、連日息が詰まるような生活をずっと続けててさ、そんなのは心にも体にも悪いだけだぜ。やっぱりたまにはパーッと弾けなきゃな。
Literally yesterday, bro.
放っておいてくださいまし。私だってそりゃ部活がまたやれたらと思っていますわよ。
With one word, but she looked down.
みんなで遊んだ方が楽しいのはさとこだってよく知ってるだろ。
Dude, she gets that. You're really pressing the issue right now, so much for waiting for that smile to come back.
俺たちは仲間だぜ。みんなで一緒に過ごすようにできてるんだよ。さとこだって昨日みんなでお祭りで騒いで楽しかったろ。
Rena nearly said something, but she was too late.
ケイチさん、何を言ってますの？
My arm on her shoulder seemed to weigh her down, and she threw it off.
私がお祭りで楽しく、いつ遊んだって言うんですの？楽しく遊んだのはケイチさんだけじゃありませんの。
I looked over to Mion for help, but now everyone was looking down. My instincts told me that Satoko hadn't gone to the festival. But Rena said it herself, that she went with Mion to Satoko's house to invite her. Not that she actually got her.
さとこちゃん、途中で帰っちゃったの。神社には行かなかった。
どうして？
I realized the absurdity of what I just said with Satoko in front of me.
おじが家で待ってるのに一人だけ遊んでると悪いって言って、神社の直前で。
私たちも引き止めたんだよ。今日はおじさん公認だからちゃんと遊んでも怒られないんだよって。
At some point, tears had begun welling up in Satoko's eyes. Satoko, so afraid of her uncle that she couldn't even allow herself time with her friends, and went home. No, she was even afraid of letting herself have a good time with her friends.
圭一さんはいいですわね。みんなで楽しくお祭り一夜を過ごせて。聞けば大層盛り上がって大活躍だったそうじゃないですの。お羨ましいことですわ。
Smiling to herself, her tears began to fall.
私には養わなければならない叔父がいますの。圭一さんみたいにご両親にのんびり養ってもらってる人とはわけが違いますですのよ。
さとこ。
楽しくお祭りが過ごせてよかったですわね。私の分まで楽しく過ごせて本当におよろしかったですこと。私だって部活がしたいですわ。みんなで楽しく大騒ぎして楽しくて楽しくて。でも今の私そんなの
Unable to withstand such violent emotion, a few teardrops slid down her cheek. But even though she was having such a terrible time, not once did she ever say that it was hard for her. It was a sad, obstinate bravery. But the days when Satoko had to feel like that were over. Satoko didn't need to endure it, to bear it anymore. She could forget all about it now and smile. I was so frustrated at not being able to tell her that directly. Instead, I said something that I'm not sure I should have said before I thought twice about it. Oh no, what are you about to say? I'm like preemptively, like, facepalming.
帰ってこないんだろ。あいつは。
The words were deeply meaningful to me, but I didn't know if Satoko understood them.
帰ってこないって誰がですの？
ゆうべは帰らなかったんだろ。お前のおじは。
何を言ってますの、圭一さんは。
Least suspicious thing Keichi has said, bro. Now, the real fear is that she's gonna be like, oh no, he came home alright. Satoko shouted with all her might.
あいつがいついなくなったって言うんですの？いつ？
落ち着けよ。だって昨日あいつは。
Why are you still on this, dude? He really rushed things. He had no patience.
圭一さんが何を言ってるのか全然わかりませんでしたよ。
さとここそ何を言ってんだよ。だってあの男は。
I killed him. Killed him yesterday. Killed him for sure. And I buried him. Buried him whole. He could never have returned to his house.
昨日だって私にいっぱい意地悪して怒鳴ってわめいて当たり散らして作ったご飯を投げられた。
Oh,
お
Lord.
味噌汁もひっくり返された。暑かった、汚かった、そしてお掃除も私がした。私が
What? Our stories weren't matching up.
あいついる？
I had a bad feeling that's where this was going.
今朝だって朝ごはんの時起こせって言われたから起こしたのに怒られた。
Somehow... Yeah, okay. Okay. So Keiichi remembers something that literally didn't even happen.
起こさなかったらまた怒るように起こしても怒られた。
さとこ。
Rikichan went over to Satoko and said a few words of consolation. Bro, you messed up. But Satoko angrily refused those words and thrust Rikichan away.
いいに
Keichi, please don't say something like, I'm your Nini.
早く帰ってきてよ。
Crying, Satoko slowly walked out into the hallway. After a moment, Rika-chan went after her. I couldn't stop thinking about the words Satoko had spoken while crying. I buried her uncle last night, but she said this morning. That was impossible. I buried him last night, so she couldn't have seen her uncle this morning. What was Satoko? At that point, I heard Mion's cold voice.
ねえケイちゃん、さとこのおじさんが帰ってこないって
Yeah, you're a fool, bro.
何？
Gulp. I said too much. I let my emotions get the better of me. Yeah, I mean, you do that like literally all the time.
レナも聞いたよ。さとこちゃんのおじさんが帰ってこないって言った。
どうして？なんで帰ってこないの？
おかしいよね。だって今朝もちゃんとさとこちゃんのおじさんはいるんだよ。なのになんで帰ってこないなんて言うのかな。
Man, that's what we're trying to figure out.
ケイちゃん、言ってることがさっきから変。
Suddenly, Mion and Rena started to speak in strange and creepy voices. What were they doing? What were they saying? Eyes
ケイ
coming.
ちゃんは
Yep.
さとこのおじさんがいると何か都合が悪いことでもあるわけ？
お前らこそ何を言ってるんだ。サトコのおじなんかいない方がいいに決まってるだろうが。
それはもちろんいない方がいいよね。よね。
Right. What is happening? Dude, what is going on? Something wasn't right. The next thing I knew, Mion and Rena were smiling thinly, and their eyes were dark and muddy in a way that I'd never seen before. And as our eyes met, that mud even seemed to fill the air.
さとこのおじは確かに嫌なやつだよね。私もいなくなった方がいいやつだと思うよ。でもさ、仕方ないじゃない。
Nothing we can do. Something's wrong. Something's clearly wrong here. What the hell was happening? After a moment, a chilly, liquid-like feeling, as though my blood had been mixed with sherbet, crawled up my spine.
仕方ないって。そりゃ仕方ないけど。でもそれじゃサトコが。
仕方がなければどうするのかな。
Rena was trying to prompt me to say more. There really was no choice, so I killed him. I killed him to protect Satoko.
それは。
放っておきなよ。そのうち解決しちゃうと思うしさ。
さとこちゃんがおじさんがいるって言ってるんだからいる。ちゃんと昨日もいたし今朝もいる。そうならそうでいいんじゃないかな。
Dude. Mion and Rena were speaking unbelievably dismissively. How could they be talking like that? Mion and Rena, they were my friends, and were seriously worried about Satoko's abuse, weren't they? Yeah, I mean, you know, if you just, like, ignore the context and just read some of these lines, right? Like, he was here yesterday and he's here today. She said so, so it's fine, right? 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 Like, dude, that is a strange thing to say. Definitely feels like they know something is up, right? Or they know what is up, whereas we don't. They would never blurt out something like this. And I definitely killed Satoko's uncle. No matter what Satoko or anyone else says, I wouldn't acknowledge it, because him being alive was impossible. There is no way he was alive. It was impossible. And yet, since Satoko herself said he was here, then he was alive. I didn't know why or how, but suddenly Mion and Rena were at my side, just standing there silently.
帰ろうよ、ケイちゃん。
帰ったらね、今日は久しぶりにレナ宝探しに行くつもりなんだ。みーちゃんも来るんだよ。
ケイちゃんも一緒に行こう。もちろん拒否権はないからね。
Oh lord. You're gonna die. If words could freeze blood, then there was no doubt that they would have frozen me solid. I could hear it, a strange sound, like a thin layer of ice spreading, emanating from every joint in my body. And with them closely at my sides, we left the school as if they were police officers taking me away. They talked about silly things the entire way home, like they always did, but they always stood at my sides, as if to prevent me from escaping. This was strange. Everything about this day was strange. Actually, it had been strange ever since the previous night. Yes, thinking back, it had been strange ever since killing Satoko's uncle. That creepy meeting with Takano-san was only the beginning. An insane night was still continuing. Yes, it still hadn't ended.
何？どうしたのケイちゃん。急に立ち止まったりして。
ごめん。なんでもないよ。
When I stopped, it was distant, but I definitely heard them. An extra set of footsteps. That was proof. Proof that insane night hadn't ended. And there's the footsteps too. I haven't even been thinking about that, but like... Mion left where she usually did, and finally we came to my house.
じゃあね、ケイチくん。お家で待っててね。レナ、すぐに迎えに行くから。
What was it? She was inviting me along on one of her oversized garbage treasure hunts at the dam site, right? But why now? Mion coming along was strange too. Mion may have accepted Rena's little hobby, but she hated fishing through garbage, so she'd never come with her before. And the location specifically being the dam site was a little creepy. The dam construction site was completely outside the flow of everyday life. It was so remote that no one ever went there unless they thought to in particular. Nobody lived there, and there were no lights, so at night it got dark very quickly. I was being forcibly invited there. There was no reason I had to fear Rena and Mion. Besides, wouldn't the trouble I'd make by refusing them to be a pain to deal with? In that way, it didn't seem like going treasure hunting with them was a bad idea. But an insane night was continuing. Having the sirens of instinct been wailing in my mind for a while now, warning me that Rena and Mion were strange, that I needed to be cautious. The warning sirens were so freaking loud, I felt like my head would split in two.
レナ、俺、実はちょっと用事があるんだ。
Yeah, nice try, buddy. You're not getting out of this.
用事？何の？
なんのって、用事だよ、用事。
Yeah, that ain't gonna fly, bro.
用事なら、なんでみーちゃんがいるうちに言ってくれなかったの？みーちゃんとはダム現場で待ち合わせって言って別れちゃった後なのに。
Because he's lying. And you probably know that. And we're probably about to get her screaming Uso-da in my ear. Rena was smiling, but her words made her discomfort clear.
ごめん。ちょっと言い出すタイミングを逃しちゃって。
That's so cat, bro.
本当に？
You're lying, aren't you? You just made that up now, you liar. That's what Rena's eyes said to me.
俺、頭が痛いんだ。
Now that one is true.
風邪かもしれない。だから病院に行って薬をもらってきたいんだよ。
本当に？
That wasn't really a lie. My head did hurt a little bit, so I wasn't lying. Rena, she couldn't figure out if my head hurt or not, just by looking at it.
なら仕方ないね。
After staring me in the eyes for a few moments, she fired a sharp, needle-like stare at me. The tension in my body loosened, and it felt like my knees might buckle.
診療所に行くなら早く行った方がいいと思うよ。あそこたまに早く閉まるから。
ありがとう。そうするよ。
Why do I feel like going to the clinic is somehow a W?
必ず行くんだよ、病院。
行くよ。
本当に行くんだよ。
行く。
It seemed like Rena had realized that I was going to refuse her invitation for a while now. With how serious she looks, she might actually call the clinic later to make sure I went. I couldn't say anything careless. Lying about getting checked out was just an excuse to decline a request in the first place. It didn't matter whether I actually went.
ちゃんと行くよ。なんなら明日、病院のレシートを持って行ってもいい。
それいいね。必ずもらっておいてね。
So she's gonna check your card.
レナ、明日見るから。
You can't lie to her right now. Another tingle started crawling up my back. There was no ignoring it. Ren and Mia must have been monitoring my movements. That wasn't normal. Far from it. All of it was insane. I did what I did because I wanted my peaceful life back. But what? What on earth was all this? It was far from peaceful. Something had gone mad, leaving the world out of order. With the other Keichi Maibara, with those creepy footsteps up in hearing, with Ren and Mion acting so curious, and above all, with him being alive. Where was I? Hinamizawa Village, Shishibone. I knew that much. Was this really the Hinamizawa I knew?
おい、前原圭一。ここは、どこなんだ
I asked, whipping around before the front door to face the one who has been following in my wake all day. Nobody would have been there, of course. Keiichi Maibara, huh? That's what I just called him. Called the one who had been trailing behind me this whole time. Yeah, that was kind of my thought, right? I guess I hadn't really said anything, but I was like, my initial assumption is that whatever Keiichi was at that festival might be the footsteps we're hearing. That shadowy presence, always clinging to me, like it was constantly watching for the opportunity to change places. Footsteps always following me was another impossibility. It couldn't have been a ghost, so it was just impossible. So the strangeness must have been my ears, my head, or Hinamizawa. Everything I could see was the same exact Hinamizawa I knew so well, and that gave me the creeps. Eventually, I decided to actually go to the clinic. I really didn't want to go outside, but a stronger feeling than that desire was the fear Rena might actually be keeping an eye on me to see if I went to the hospital. But before I went to the clinic, there was something I wanted to make sure of. Are both shovels going to be in the storehouse or something? Satoshi's bat is going to be there? It was at school. I pretended I'd forgotten something and was going back to the classroom to pick it up. As soon as the thought crossed my mind, I was overwhelmed by paranoia. I was just going to the classroom, but I hated it so much, having to be so careful to fake it. After carefully verifying once more that nobody was watching, I went over to the locker. Yes, Satoshi's locker. I committed the crime with the bat I found in this locker, Satoshi's bat. And then I'd thrown the bat into the swamp, which meant the bat shouldn't have been inside. But, what if the bat was still in here? I'm gonna be honest, you could have just looked for the shovels, but, you know. It was a very dreadful, incomprehensible idea, but if it was true, it would explain a lot. If that was in here, yesterday's events would have all been a delusion. No, an illusion. I hadn't killed anyone, and I'd gone to the festival. I had a great time rampaging about with everyone. It would prove that Keiichi Maibara was really me. Proof that I was only under some strange assumption that I had killed Satoko's uncle. Proof that it had all been a wild fantasy. I would explain everything. Nothing happened yesterday. I had just gone mad, unable to separate my shocking uncle-killing dream from reality. Actually, wouldn't it be more crazy if the bat was missing still? That would explain everything. If the bat was here, would I be able to accept that reality? If it was here, nothing will have changed. If it was here, it would just mean I'd gone crazy. Preparing myself for the worst, I opened the locker door. I was actually scared of opening it slowly, so I threw it open with a bang. And just like the first time, the choking scent of smell and sweat, like a stale towel, came flowing out. There was a baseball uniform, and some miscellaneous other things, like notebooks. There was also a shoe pouch. And as for the bat, it wasn't here. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, great. Okay. Alright. How? How does that make sense? How in the world? Okay, so... Good lord. So it wasn't just some crazy delusion, which is what I expected. Right. What? What does this mean? Because I mean, this obviously implies that the murder did happen and Keiichi isn't crazy. But it didn't happen, right? I might be about ready to just call time shenanigans, no lie. I might be at that point. But I don't know. Let's just keep moving. And as for the bat, it wasn't here. It was how I left it when I took the bat out. There was no doubt. Yesterday really happened. Now that I knew I wasn't a lunatic, I felt relieved. But at the same time, I wasn't the crazy one, and Hinamizawa was. And that was evidence of a reality I found just as difficult to accept. There was noise, somehow, creeping into everything I saw. The road was losing a tiny bit of color. So, what did I know about last night now? Now that I'd made sure the bat wasn't there, I didn't need to be here anymore. Shall I go? For real, to the hospital. And you better. It was my first time going to the hospital, but from what I'd heard, it wasn't far from school. My mom had told me where it was. A big, easy-to-see road went straight there. I went past the shopping street, made a turn. It wasn't overly hard to spot the sign with Irie Clinic written on it. It says what? That sign says what now? Dude, Irie was already at the top of the list, but now there's like 3 degrees of separation, right? What the hell? I was already suspicious of the clinic. There was one other person, an older man, there in the air-conditioned waiting room. I went up to the counter and told them it was my first time here. The man behind the counter glanced at the clock and said there would be a short wait. It was almost 5. Clinic hours would be ending soon. As I sat in this unfamiliar waiting room, isolated from everyone, and let myself feel the cool air, I actually felt relieved. What should I tell the doctor when he comes? I could tell him I had a cold, but I was the very picture of health. Actually, I wanted him to check my head. I wanted someone to confirm for me whether I was really sane or not.
前原圭一さん、診察室へお入りください。
Huh? The voice from the other side of the examination curtain. I thought I'd heard it somewhere before.
こんにちは。
Okay, bro. It turned... Okay. Alright.
ここでお会いするのは初めてですね。
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Wow, ain't that crazy how I already suspected you, and there's also a mysterious drug going around, and it just so happens that this clinic is yours, and you're a doctor, and wow, isn't that crazy? Isn't that swell? Okay.
監督って、お医者さんだったんですか?
Now that you mention it, he did seem to know his way around when he was looking at my shoulder in the nurse's office. It would make sense if he was actually a doctor. Come to think of it, our teacher called him Irie Sensei, didn't she?
一応お医者さんなんかやっています。お医者さんはいいですよ。若いすべすべなお肌を見放題の触り放題。
Seek help.
怪しいお注射で自由を奪って私だけの専属メイドに。
Hey, relax! Stop actually speaking what I think might be facts. That might not be a joke, dude. I'm being serious. I think he might be serious right now.
ありがとうございました。今のを見てただけで風邪が治りました。失礼します。ペコリ。
Polite bow.
わったったった。前原さん。冗談です。さあ座って診察させてください。聴診器を当てますから前原さんのすべすべのお胸を見せてください。
For some reason, I felt really relieved. After that insane night, as much as I thought everything had gone crazy, Coach was here doing the same thing he always did. I was very happy for that.
風邪ではないようですね。むしろ全身の擦り傷や切り傷の方が痛々しいくらいです。ひょっとして半袖半ズボンで藪の中に入って遊びましたか？
I guess he was. I was maybe a little foolish.
切り傷から破傷風菌が入った可能性もないとは言えませんし、
Oh, Lord. And now he's gonna give us an injection, isn't he? As I was chasing that man last night, I'd kept being scraped by bits of trees. I didn't realize I had so many cuts.
昨日のお祭りではしゃぎすぎましたね。
Oh, wow, wait. Even physically, he's the same. Okay, so it's pretty obvious that did happen then. This Keichi lived that out. But nobody else did. Nobody else lived that day.
若いというのはいいことです。
And once again, I apparently went to the festival.
監督も行ったんですよね、お祭り。
ええ、もちろんですよ。私こう見えても綿流しの実行委員会の役員ですからね。
俺に会いましたか？
This coach was the same coach that I'd always known, and I felt like I could trust him more than my weird friends, so I asked.
実は私、本部テントでずっと会長さんたちとお酒を飲んでたんで、全然お祭りは見て回ってないんですよ。前原さんには会ってないと思います。
そうですか。
変わった質問をしましたね。ひょっとして今日寝不足ですか？いけませんよ。成長期はよく食べよく寝て育つんですから。
Coach let out a laugh. He didn't laugh in an unnatural way like Mion and Rena did. Coach was okay. He was the coach from the world I knew. He wasn't someone from this abnormal world. Why could this actually be true? Right? That's the most concerning part.
こんな話、きっと変だと思うんですけど、笑わないで聞いてほしいんです。
ねえ、どうぞ。思春期のシャイな悩み、大いに歓迎ですよ。
俺と瓜二つな人間がいるなんてありえますか？
Coach hadn't expected that question at all and couldn't say anything for a moment. But then he smiled calmly and quietly answered.
迷信ですが、世界には自分と全く同じ顔をした人があと2人いる
Oh lord.
なんて話を聞いたことがありますね。
Oh lord, we got the Keichi doppelganger.
いるならぜひお会いしてみたいものですが。あと、おとぎ話にも自分の分身が登場する話がいろいろありますよ。ドイツのおとぎ話に出てくるドッペルのお化けなどは有名です。
ドッペルのお化け？
ええ、自分の姿に瓜二つなんだそうです。不幸の前触れなんだそうで、これに遭ってしまうと近いうちに死んでしまうみたいな話らしいですよ。
When you meet them, you're sure to die soon. The story ended directly in death, plain and simple, and it made my spine tingle. Coach wasn't saying it to scare me though. He was just offering a casual anecdote, but that made it feel all the more real.
そのお化けがひなみ沢に出るなんて話はありますか？
さて、どうでしょう。
Coach must have thought he was being teased, so he laughed in an exaggerated way. But when I didn't smile along with him, his laughter steadily grew fainter.
すみません。ちょっと真面目な話のつもりだったんで。
いえ、こっちこそ笑ってすみませんでした。何か気になることでもおありですか？
How much is he gonna tell him? I wondered if I should tell him. Then, after resolving myself one final time, I slowly spoke.
俺、昨日はお祭りに行っていないんです。
そうでしたか。お祭りは来年もあります。その時また。
そうじゃなくて、俺は祭りに行っていないのに、みんなが言うには、俺は祭りにいたらしいんですよ。こんなことってあるんですか？
After blinking his eyes in amazement, Coach thought seriously about what I was trying to say, and he answered, choosing his words carefully.
お話を整理しますね。つまり前原くんは綿流しのお祭りに行ったけど、その記憶がないということですか？
It's actually even worse than that. He explicitly remembers something else, right? It's not even just that he doesn't remember what happened that day. He does, and it just wasn't the Watanagashi festival at all. I was trying to say something completely different, but I suppose any sane person would come to that conclusion. That night, Keichi Maibara was actually at the festival. I was saying I didn't go. That obviously meant my memories of going there had failed me. But that was absolutely impossible. That vivid act I had committed during the downpour couldn't possibly have been an illusion. All these scrapes on my body prove it, as does the fact that the bat wasn't in the locker.
いえ、違うんです、監督。俺は本当に祭りに行っていないんです。
気を悪くしないでくださいよ、前原さん。前原さんにはこれまでに気づいたら見知らぬ場所にいたとか、そういう記憶の欠落を経験されたことがありますか？
ないです。それに記憶を失ったとかそういうのじゃない。だってその祭りの時間には別の用事を確かにやっていましたから、寝てて意識がなかったとかそういうのじゃありません。
その用事は間違いなく、大変失礼ですが、何かの思い込みでなく。
間違いありません。完全にはっきりとした記憶、いや事実です。
お祭りの時間に神社にいなくて、よそで別の用事をしていた。それをはっきりした形で証明できますか？
Literally the cuts all over him. That's right. Thinking it through brought me to this. There's only one way to prove that I really wasn't at the festival yesterday, and that was to show that there was no doubt I had killed her uncle. Coach saw me struggling to answer, and his eyes looked a little cold. I guess they would. After all, from Coach's perspective, I was just a weirdo sputtering nonsense.
少し横になりましょうか。心を落ち着けて楽にしましょう。
別に横になりに来たわけで遠慮します。
少し神経に高ぶりがあるようです。鎮静剤を注射して少し目をつむってみませんか？
Oh lord. Oh, don't let him do it.
それで
俺は異常者じゃない。
I realized Coach was treating me like a deviant, so I raised my voice.
気に障ったなら謝ります。ですからどうか落ち着いて。
俺は絶対に祭りには行っていない。それは本当に間違いないんです。
分かってます。分かってますから、どうか落ち着いて深呼吸を。
あんたは全然分かっていない。
Coach was stunned and stared in stupefaction.
分かっていますよ。前原さん、あなたは昨日はお祭りに来なかった。
I feel like he understands all too well.
そうですよね。
I don't know. I'm blaming him.
私は信じます。信じますよ。
Coach jotted down a brief note in his records. He was writing it in German, so that his patient wouldn't know what it said. But I could make a good guess at what he wrote.
あの時間に何をしていたか全部話さないと信じませんか？
いいえ、信じますから。どうか座ってください。
Before I sat, I tilted my head back a little. The blood on my face all drained out, and I quieted down. After taking a deep breath, I made sure that I was calm now.
俺が祭りの会場にいることはありえない。なぜならその時間に俺は。
Should I tell him or not? I really didn't want to go on living like this, feeling this horrible. And I said them, the final fatal words.
聡子の王子を殺していたからです。
Well, he actually just came out and said it. That's wild. I could smell the concrete in the room. I could feel the air around us sharpen. Nobody moved. Only the sound of the clock ticking told us time hadn't stopped. With his mouth wide open, Coach even forgot to blink for a little while.
あなたが聡子ちゃんのおじさんを？
Yeah, it's fine now, Keichi Maibara. Don't hesitate. Admit it. With all your strength.
はい、俺が昨日殺しました。
I spoke clearly and fluidly. I could easily tell that Coach's mind had gone completely blank.
どうしてそんなことを？
What do you mean, why?
いえ、それは愚問ですね。
聡子を救う最も直接的な方法だと考えるに至り実行しました。後悔はわずかもありません。
そうですか。
Coach smiled thinly and nodded a bit.
だから俺は祭りの会場にいるわけがないんです。
I left the brightness of my house for the darkness of the outside. After that, I dug holes, made phone calls. I had my hands full. Then I attacked him. killed him, and buried him. It was pouring hard at the time. The festival started that evening, but was suspended due to the rain. There were no gaps in my memories. From the late afternoon until it started to rain, there was no time for me to possibly have gone to the festival.
その体中の傷はその時に。
Indeed they are.
そうです。里子の家を少し行ったところに、あそこで襲い、逃げるあいつを追い、町に至る一本道で殺すに至りました。
Why am I suddenly feeling like Keiichi's gonna end up dead and buried in the grave that he dug? I don't know, that thought just came to me.
それは本当に。
Killing her uncle, it wasn't some wild fantasy? I could tell that Coach didn't believe me, so I spoke slowly, not letting myself grow excited.
本当です。サトシのバットで、そのバットは、あいつが乗ってきたバイクと一緒に沼に捨てました。死体は、殺した場所に穴を掘り埋めました。すべて、自分が一人でやりました。
さとこちゃんの叔父はバイクで通りかかったんですね。ではあなたはそれを期待して延々と待ち伏せを。
We just lured him in with the phone call.
あいつが家から出ないことは想定していました。だから電話で適当な嘘を喋って、あいつが出かけるように仕向けました。
電話で呼び出した。でもあなたの家とさとこちゃんの家は離れています。電話をしてからではとても待ち伏せに間に合わないのでは。
襲撃予定場所から最も近い電話として。
でも前原さん、当日は日曜日です。学校には施錠がされていて入れないのでは。
Bro, he killed a man. You think he cares that the school was locked up?
偶然その時、営林署の人が中に出入りしたんです。その隙に入りました。
After that, Coach grilled me on a few different things regarding the incident. He made sure to question me carefully, looking for any contradictions in my account.
信じましょう。あなたが昨日したことは夢とは思えない。
I explained everything, including minor details that only someone who had actually committed the act could explain. I could, of course. It was only yesterday. Coach realized that my story had no expedient coincidences or too convenient details that would have existed in a daydream or a delusion, and finally seemed to want to believe me.
これでもまだ、俺が記憶をなくして祭り会場に行ったと思いますか？
Coach slowly shook his head.
でも、クラスのみんなが、昨日、確かに俺が祭りにいたと言います。そんなことがあり得るでしょうか？
あるわけがない。きっとクラスの皆さんはあなたによく似た誰かとあなたを見間違えたのでしょう。
No.
それに集団心理が働いて、皆さんはあなたがお祭りにいたと錯覚してしまっているに違いありません。
They couldn't have mistaken me. Mion and all the rest said they were spending time with Keiichi Maibara. It was much more than just having mistaken someone else for me, but saying that out loud would just confuse Coach. He spoke to me in whispered tones.
罪の意識はあるんですか？
No. It didn't sound like he was criticizing me. And even if he had, I would have flatly said the same thing.
ありません。あいつのいなかった平穏な時間を取り戻すために行いました。だから、俺はあいつを殺したことなんかさっさと忘れて、これまで通りに生活するつもりです。あいつが現れる前、里子がいつも見せてくれたあの笑顔が戻った時、
I feel like
ようやく全ては終わります。
I feel like he hasn't mentioned the most crucial detail in all of this, which is Satoko's uncle is alive and well, right? Like,
犯行を誰かに目撃されたということは？
ないと思います。目撃されてれば、もうとっくに逮捕されてるでしょうから。
私は医者です。人の命を。だから私から人間の命を奪うことを肯定する旨の発言はできません。だから私はあなたにこう言います。
Coach slowly rose and placed a hand on my shoulder.
さとこちゃんを救ってくれて。
Coach's
ありがとう。
Coach's eyes started shedding warm tears. When I looked at him, I started to feel some tears of my own. I didn't know what I was crying for, and so for a little while, the two men in the room fought back their tears.
でも、おかしいんです。
おかしいとは？
確かに殺したはずなのに、あの男は 生きて家に帰ったらしいんです。
Coach's expression immediately sharpened.
状況にもよりますが、気絶や仮死状態など、素人が見ると死んだようにしか見えない状態もいくつかあります。
Dude, I get that, but I think everybody would have realized, oh wow, his skull is caved in compared to yesterday.
その可能性は？
脈を取ったわけではありませんが、確実に仕留めたと思います。
前原さんが襲った時の状況を再現してもらってもいいですか？
Coach rolled up a Health and Fitness Week poster nearby and offered it to me to represent the bat. Though I may have been lost to the emotions of a beast that night, I remembered in detail the number of times I swung the bat, the angles I had swung from, and the force I had applied. Using Coach as a stand-in for the uncle, I reproduced them over, one by one.
そしてあいつが足を取られてよろめいた時のその時、これまでとは違った手応えがありました。頭蓋骨が割れたんだと思いました。
Coach was calmly analyzing this information, using the places I'd struck and the situation at hand to find out what state the uncle's body had been in.
そして死んだかどうか自信が持てなかったので、倒れた後も何度か殴りつけました。
その時の反応は？
初めは殴るたびに体が跳ねるような感じがありましたが、やがてそれもなくなり、何の反応もなくなりました。
Coach folded his arms and said, a few times. Dude, this is like me trying to figure out what the hell is going on in this game. And then he spoke.
死んでいます。ほぼ間違いなく。
それは仮死状態ではなく？
前原さんの話からだけではなかなか判断がつきませんが、ほぼ確実だと思います。それに前原さんは死体を泥の中に埋め、結構な時間をかけて埋めていますよね。
Yeah, it probably would have naturally died with no medical intervention.
仮に30分で埋めたとして、その男は30分間も泥水に沈められていたことになります。それだけの時間、呼吸が止められたら確実に脳死します。
殴った強さ以前に埋める過程で確実に絶命したと？
そういうことです。30分間泥に埋められていて生きていられる人などありえません。
ありえないですよね。でも聡子は生きてると。
Coach, a doctor, just gave his stamp of approval. He was dead for sure. That made it seem all the more unfair that he could still be among the living.
前原さん、これはとても恐ろしい想像なのですが、前原さんが殺した相手が叔父でなく別人である可能性は？
I mean, I guess that's our best bet. He's right. That could be why. It cleared up the inconsistency of my definitely having killed someone, but him still being alive. It doesn't explain the Keichi that was there, though.
そんなはずはない。だってほら、監督と一緒に聡子の家の前で酒瓶の袋を運んだ時、窓から顔を出した男がいたじゃないですか。あいつですよね、聡子の叔父は。
ええ、間違いありませんよ。あの男です。
実はもう一人叔父がいるなんてことは？
聞いたことがありません。あの男だけです。
あいつの特徴を教えてもらえますか？
まず身長がですね、175、もう少しあるかもしれません。
In order to eliminate the worst possibility that I'd killed someone else, Coach began to thoroughly compare what the man in his mind looked like with what I had told him the person I killed looked like. But, no matter how in-depth my description went, none of the characteristics differed. The uncle's traits, according to Coach, were all exactly the same as the person I'd killed. Those traits were all extremely vague, and they weren't particularly distinct at a glance.
もっとこう絶対にあいつだと識別できる特徴はありませんか？
そういえば、私は見たことありませんが、聡子ちゃんが昔、背中に虎だかなんだかの入れ墨がある、なんて言っていたような気がします。
Interesting. Well, the only way to see that would be to go dig him up, yeah?
入れ墨？
That was really important. Not everyone had a tattoo. I found a tiger tattoo on the back of the man's corpse. It would be proof I'd killed the right one. At the moment, though, there was one other thing that would verify this. To go to Satoko's house and see for myself the uncle that had returned home despite having died. But that was far more terrifying than digging up the body and looking at its back. Without even looking at the tattoo, I knew for sure the one I'd killed had been Satoko's uncle. Yeah, I think that's the scary possibility, right? And I'm starting to wonder is like, could this explain, right, like the discrepancies we saw in when these corpses were found, right? In chapter 2. Or like when we knew people were alive and the corpse that was found, the autopsy was committed on it, right? What if, like, Mion did die, and then something similar to what happened in this case happened, right? And whatever happened that day was, like, not what happened that day. Which to me reads as time shenanigans. I want to be clear about that. That's my first thought. But whatever happened that day didn't actually happen. But, like, for some reason the corpses stay, right? I don't know why that would make sense. But, like, clearly some things about the world remain the same. It still doesn't explain the fake Keichi, though. Well, I don't know, does it? Maybe. I'm trying to think about it, right? Like, I guess if it kept Mion alive in that way, right? Like, if there was a dead Mion, but there was also another Mion, right? Like, could they have technically existed at the same time? I don't know. Okay, so that one's just, like, maybe too early to say on that one, but I wouldn't be shocked if... I really wouldn't be shocked if what just happened is really connected to the same mystery in Chapter 2. It seems really likely, even. And I honestly think the body's gonna be there, right? And I think that would prove it, like, that it's linked, right? And so that's what I want to see. I want to see us go dig that up. I cracked his head open and killed him. And yet, he'd gone back home. There wasn't any misunderstanding, or even the shadow of a doubt in my mind about having killed him. And yet... it was impossible for him to exist. Kind of like how Keichi Maibara had been at the festival, despite it being impossible. That small commonality made me feel as though a faint but bizarre force was permeating this insane Hinamizawa.
一体どういうことなのでしょう。
Yeah, ain't that a question.
前原さんはお祭りには行かず、聡子ちゃんのおじさんを殺していたにもかかわらず、お祭りにはあなたがいて、そして殺したはずのおじさんも生きている。
何がなんだかさっぱりわからないです。そうやって整理して言うと、まるで俺が悪い夢を見ていて、実は殺人なんて存在しなかったんじゃないかと思えてしまう。
But the physical injuries and the bat being gone prove it.
でも事実なんです。この手でバットでガツンガツンと殴ったあの感触は絶対に夢や幻なんかじゃないんです。
Coach let out a slow sigh, then after looking at the clock, got up.
ちょっとこの話、もう少し真剣にやりましょう。ちょっと失礼して、紅茶でも入れてきてあげます。診療所も終わりの時間ですからね。ジムの方とかも返してあげないと。
Coach stood up and went out into the hallway, leaving me alone. The clock was about to strike 6. I was at the festival, and the uncle I'd killed was alive. Had I really committed murder yesterday? The only whisper of a fact that proved it happened was the absence of the bat from Satoshi's locker. In any case, I was glad that Coach had taken my nonsense seriously. I just confessed to murder. Normally that would frighten a person away. But Coach didn't run. He cried with me. I was glad he did. Like so, my tension smoothly melted away, and I suddenly realized I really had to urinate. I thought to use the restroom while Coach had stepped out. There was one across from the waiting room. As soon as I left the room, I saw Coach and 2 male doctors wearing white clothing standing in the shadows of the hallway nearby. I didn't particularly intend to eavesdrop or anything, but I was quite surprised upon noticing how uneasy they seemed. I hid behind the wall and quietly listened in. It seemed like Coach was giving directions to the 2 doctors.
紅茶ですね。用意します。
睡眠導入剤を入れて、種類は任せます。味はミルクと砂糖でごまかしてください。
Okay.
急激な眠気に不信感を抱く可能性もあります。 興奮状態に陥って暴れ出す可能性も。
その場合は取り押さえましょう。男性スタッフはまだ何人か残ってますか？
山犬が1人、それに私たちを含めて3人です。
Bro, you gotta get out of here. What? What was all this? I think I was already agitated, despite what Coach said. Was that it? Was it just a casual conversation, and it was only sounding unbelievable to me? Coach said he would bring some black tea and left the room. And then, in the shadows, he was telling his subordinates to put some kind of sleeping powder in the tea? Plus, they were getting extra help, in case I thought the sudden sleepiness was suspicious and started getting violent? Hey, wait, Keichi Maibara. Calm down, calm down. There's no way something this stupid could be happening. I mean, he was genuinely listening to my story, and he even cried with me. I thought he was the one person in Hinamizawa who would understand. This was...。
作り話か虚言の兆候があり、特に昨日の記憶が完全に混乱。虚実の区別の喪失、多重人格等の精神障害に酷似しています。でも、こんな急激な精神障害の発症は普通では考えられません。あるいは先天的、もしくは引っ越し前からそういう兆候があったのか。
You know, it sure is suspicious just how many Hinamizawans developed this, huh? I'm just saying.
引っ越し前に精神科に通院例がないか調べたいところです。とにかく前原さんには穏便にお休みいただきます。
The two doctors nodded deeply.
前原さんのご両親にも連絡しておいた方が良いですね。何と言えばいいか言葉が思いつきませんが、彼の自宅の電話番号を調べてください。
Keiichi, you gotta get out of here, bro. My eyes, still moist, began to shed tears once more. This was too cruel. I really thought he had actually understood and had believed what I'd told him. But now, from the other side of that wall, he was bluntly treating me like a crazy person. I believed you. I believed you. I had let down my guard because I thought you were the only ally I had left after that insane night. Was that a lie? All that about thanking me on Satoko's behalf. Were you just pretending in order to keep me placated? Ugh. My tears fell to the floor in frustration. I was an idiot. I was such an idiot for believing that bastard. I heard footsteps approaching the doctors. A man in a dress shirt with no tie came running up.
入江先生、大変です。高野さんが見つかりました。
高野さんが一体どこに？
それが山中で焼死体で発見されたらしく。
死んだ？高野さんがですか？
The men, all surprised, exchanged glances. Dead? Takano-san. Okay, so some things are the same. I will say, I mean, Irie's proven himself quite the actor, but I think it goes, like, kind of without saying that right now, he is confused. He didn't seem to expect this. He doesn't seem to know what's going on with Keiichi. Right? Right now, what I'm wondering is, like, is this just elite acting? Because I assumed he was behind these. Hey, wait. So does that mean when I cursed her, wishing for her death, that wish was granted?
焼死とは一体どういうことですか？それは事故ですか？
県警の発表では他殺の可能性が極めて高いと。
As I cried, I laughed quietly. Serves you right. Serves you right. If I hadn't run into that woman, my murder would have been perfect. But she just had to come driving up to me and tried to coerce me like that. I regretted not having killed her on the spot. Now she was dead anyway. My curse, my wish for her demise, it was fulfilled. Serves you right. Serves you right.
リサさんが死に、高野さんが死に、
Who's Risa?
一体ひなみ沢には何が起こっていると言うんですか？
Risa is either Tomotake's real name or somebody from a prior year, or somebody else died too.
まさかこれが今年のお社様のたたりだなんて言うんじゃないでしょうね。
Like hell I'll let that curse be real, Coach said. Everyone present just nodded as Coach cursed at no one in particular. Yes, maybe it wasn't Oyashiro-sama, but this was definitely a spell, a curse. I wished for her to die, so she did. If this wasn't just a coincidence, and she died because I wished for it, then you'll die next, Coach. You betrayed me. You pretended to believe me, but deep down you thought I was a madman. You looked down on me with all that pity in your eyes.
ではとりあえず紅茶の準備を。紅茶は私が持って入ります。私以外には彼は心を許さないようですからね。
Shit. What do I do? What do I do, Keichi Maibara? This time I heard the voice of a nurse.
入江先生。あ、いらっしゃいましたか。お電話です。
今ちょっと忙しいので後でかけ直すと伝えてください。誰からです？
沖宮警察の大石様ですけど。
Oh, Lord.
ちゃ悪いタイミングですね。出ます。
Coach left to go answer the phone. The other man headed towards the room with the teapot to make the black tea, like Coach had ordered them to do. Fortunately, Coach having to take that phone call meant there would be extra time for me to act. I had to decide what to do now. Would I let him make me drink the sedative-infused tea, or be held down and thrown into a mental hospital? Nothing would come from starting a brawl here. They had more people anyway, and they were all bigger than me. If it came to a fight, I didn't stand a chance in hell. If I couldn't win against them, then there was only one thing left to do. Run. Adrenaline suddenly rushed into my brain, and my body started to move with keen instinct, like it had on that night. My surface temperature quickly cooled, and the transmission routes between my cells enlarged. Using 360-degree visual information, I searched for an escape route. I would open the window behind me. Outside was a parking lot. There were no cars. A little beyond there was the bicycle I had taken to get here. I determined that this would be the quickest method of escape. I approached the window swiftly, but with little sound to raise as little suspicion as I could. With the speed and silence of a shadow, like I'd had on that night I chased her uncle. I unlocked the window and opened it up. A cool evening breeze wafted in. I stuck my head out and looked over the parking lot again. Nobody in sight. I had no need to hesitate. I quietly crawled outside and closed the window behind me. I held my breath and listened carefully. Nobody seemed to have realized I'd run. I looked around. Then I jumped onto my bicycle and zoomed away. Is he going to where the body is? The pedals clattered under the force. Had my bike always creaked like this? Did the pedals always whine every time I pushed down on them? My bike wasn't the only one crying, though. My tears fell as the wind cut through them. They rode the breeze and scattered behind me. Ugh. I hate this. I'm not the crazy one. Hinamizawa is. How dare you treat me like a madman? Die. Just fucking die already. I believed you. Alright, is he going to the body? I mean, that's my guess, but... I'd gone to the hospital in order to escape Ren and Mion's invitation, but the reality that was waiting for me had been too cruel. Who was insane, me or Hinamizawa? Or was the answer something else? I started having trouble breathing. I didn't have any clue what was happening anymore. The loud chirps of the Higurashi were irritating me. Or even the Hinamizawa Higurashi I knew so well calling into the wind. No, that wasn't quite it. They weren't calling. They were crying. The pained wailing, those lost in some kind of rhythm, in another world, no longer able to return to their own sunlight. I didn't do all that to end up in a world like that. And actually, at about this time, I might have been having fun with everyone else. Satoko would have gotten her smile back after realizing her uncle would never come home, and she might have shown it to us at our first club meeting in a while. That was the kind of world I wished for. So, what was this? Why did I end up in such a strange, ghastly world? Someone I'd killed was living like normal, and I had enjoyed myself at the festival despite not being there. I don't want it. I don't want this strange world. When did it start to go wrong? When? No matter how much I thought about it, I never understood. I rode swiftly and returned to my home. It had begun to rain during my journey back, and just like yesterday, I was now soaked. But I didn't care about something so trivial right now. The pain I felt in my heart that Coach, the one person I trusted, was acting so cruelly, was far worse. Did I have no allies in Hinamizawa anymore? With a naive thought that I at least wanted my parents to side with me, I stepped up to the front door. Wait, Keichi. It'll be dark soon. There's something you want to check, right? Oh, yes, go check that. Yes, I wanted to dig up the man's corpse and get a look at his back. There was a tiger tattoo there. I know beyond a doubt he was Sato's uncle. That long night wouldn't end until I was certain. If this insane world was all reparation, all a divine punishment, and I needed to make certain whether I had been successful enough to even deserve to pay that price. I went to the storage room again and got the shovel. It had been washed in the rain, but the paint was peeling, making it look unsightly. I never, ever wanted to touch this thing again. The sensation of it in my hands was totally different from the night before. There was a ruthless coldness about it. Yeah, it would be dark soon, so I'd need the lantern too. There would be a little bit of light from the streetlights, but it would get extremely dark. I thought I'd put the lantern here, but I suddenly noticed it wasn't anywhere to be found. Then it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Of course, on that night, I hadn't brought the lantern back with me. I'd left it at the place I buried the body. If I didn't go to get it soon, it would get very dark. And then, not only would I be unable to find the spot I'd buried the corpse, but I wouldn't even be able to find the lantern itself. If that happened, it was all over.
急ごう。
In order to fit the shovel in the basket on the front of my bike, I needed to twist it and disassemble it. But it looked like there was dirt in the joints. No matter how hard I pushed, it didn't want to come apart. After a strenuous effort, I realized I couldn't get it apart, so I decided to hold it in one hand and ride my bike with the other. Now, we've seen this movie before. With the downpour soaking me through, and a shovel in one hand, and riding one-handed, it was as if I'd returned to that night. No, return was the wrong word. It was more like that night had never ended. The pain of the raindrops striking me were no different from then. The thing that was different was Hinamizawa. The world, and nothing else. The rain clouds were already making it dark, and now was about time for the sun to set. I could tell it would only get rapidly darker. The straight road leading to town, in the middle of it. That should be where I buried it. Yes, it was near that streetlight. On the night, too, the water from the downpour was splashing down from the streetlight's overhang like a waterfall. The pouring rain was exactly the same as it had been that night, thus it brought my memories into focus. I left my bike in the brush and stepped into the forest, the ground already soaked with mud. Where had I buried him? Think. The darkness, the shadows, the water, the mud. Everything was the same. Think. And then I spotted the lantern by a fallen, moss-covered tree. That's right, I left it right there. If I left the lantern here, then I would have buried him over here. With the sensation of standing in the sludge, my feet remembered the spot better than my eyes did. I plunged my shovel into the ground. Ugh, it's hard. It wasn't here. I just dug it up, so it should have been softer. I stick my shovel down in a few spots to test what they feel like. One of them clearly felt deeper. I recalled where the lantern was, where the trees and things were in relation to each other, and knew that it had to be here. Under here slept that man's corpse. There would definitely be the tattoo of a tiger on his back, but it wasn't there. Then I had made a horrible mistake and killed someone completely unrelated instead. I would be more dazed at the fact that Sato's uncle wasn't dead, and I would regret having gotten someone else mixed up in this. If this insane world was punishment for the sin of committing murder, I wouldn't be able to accept it until I had killed Sato's uncle for good. And then, without any fear, I'd attack him again. And that time, I would kill him for sure. But what if the tattoo was there? That would mean I'd killed Sato's uncle. But that would be terribly strange. If I'd killed him for sure, then who was the uncle at Sato's house this very moment? Impossible. I didn't even know anymore what I was using the word impossible to refer to. I've used the word quite a few times today. If I had to make the words impossible fit just one thing, what would it be? That much was obvious to me.
こんなおかしな世界がありえてたまるかよ!
Yeah, right? I shouted, then turned behind me. There was nobody there, of course. It hadn't been bothering me for a while, but those footsteps had followed me this entire day. Even just now, an extra set of footsteps had splashed behind me. No one was actually there. No indications of anyone, even. But they were there.
あんたは誰だ? 俺がこっちの世界に来てからずっとついてくるな。
That's right. Thinking back, the first time I heard those footsteps was after Takano-san and I had parted. Those footsteps were my welcome into this strange, inside-out world. No one could be there. I'm actually, like, really curious. I'm really unsure with the footsteps. That's one of the things I don't even have a clue on. Because I'm starting to think it could explain the presence Keichi said he felt in Chapter 1, right? Like, it would make sense. But, like, what the hell is it? No one could be there. I'd get no response. Whoever it was, they just kept staring at me. It wasn't ominous, just unpleasant. After staring into empty space for a bit as I bathed in the rain, my illogical anger slipped away. My tension loosened, and a tired feeling reared its head. I tasted this feeling that night, too. The sudden exhaustion I felt as the tension in my brain loosened. My vision quickly narrowed, and I felt like everything around me had suddenly gotten darker. I couldn't give in to this sensation. I would light what little explosives were left in my brain and force myself to keep going. I needed to dig that man up before my stamina ran out. I needed to see the tattoo on his back. I caught my suddenly ragged breath and calmed down. Then I struck the shovel into the soft, muddy ground again. It felt exactly the same as that night. The sense of digging a hole in the beach, with water coming into it with every wave. What day was today? Had I gone back to the night of Watanagashi? Every strange thought that came to mind tormented me. Given my exhaustion, I didn't think I could manage to hold those thoughts back. Once the hole was deep, all illumination finally faded, blanketing my vision in jet black. It was probably the moment the sun had fully set too. That night, I had feared the worst and gone without using much light. My senses were so strained that I could see even in that darkness. But now, I didn't have that kind of strength left. I drained everything I had last night, and now the darkness would be lethal. I decided to turn on the lantern. Putting it on the first setting would make it give off a faint light. Even with how little there was, it was enough, and people wouldn't be able to see it from far away in this rain. I grabbed the chilled lantern, turned the dial with a click, set it to the weakest light setting, and turned it on. An uncanny world of silhouettes appeared before me. A complex and strange shadowy world, created by the intricate entanglement of trees and branches. I had only turned on a light, and it was all it took to make the world into something else. I let out a quick, tired breath and wiped the liquid, neither rain nor sweat, from my brow. Then I raised the shovel into the air and slammed it into the mud. That moment. Okay, I think that was real life. There was a police car. Was that the game? I'm not sure. The silhouettes surrounding me ominously all moved at once. Inside my head, something packed in there, something coarse but not hot or cold, was loudly rushing about. The silhouettes were all around me, looking down at me. And one of them, a silhouette bigger than the others, stepped forward.
こんばんは。
Hi, Oishi.
月の綺麗な晩ですね。
Maybe it was in the game. If that wasn't in the game, that was crazy timing. The coarseness in my brain shot through my whole spine and left me at my waist. The strength in my body all left me through my hips. I crouched down with a splash. Into the sea of mud I dug myself.
おいし
目上の人にはその後に3もつけるとなおよろしいかと思います。
I mean, I knew he'd show up eventually.
そうでないと大人になってからいろいろと苦労します。
Dog, I think we both know he ain't gonna live an adult life. It wasn't only Oishi, but 5 or 6 of them in a row, men wearing raincoats. I had no inkling that this many people had gotten so close. It was like, once I turned on the lantern, they just appeared there, sliding out of the shadows.
どうぞ。森の木立だとでも思って。
Don't mind them?
そうです。私たちのことは気にされず、どうぞ穴掘りをお続けになってください。
Bro, can someone else dig it? Bro's cooked.
こんな時間にこんな土砂降りの中で。
And here you are out in the woods digging a hole.
そんなにも真剣にやっているんですからね。邪魔なんかしませんよ。心ゆくまで掘っちゃってください。
Bro, honestly, at this point, your life's done anyways. Like, you're done. Like, just dig it. Just dig the hole. Find the body. Be like, yeah, that was me. No, thank you, I said. When I tried to get up and turn around, 2 men blocked that route. They stood on either side of me and lifted me up with amazing strength, then threw me into the sea of mud. As I soaked in the mud bath I dug for myself, I looked up at the silhouettes looking down at me. Oishi squatted, picked up my shovel, and threw it at my feet for me. It bounced loudly off the mud and hit me in the face.
ほら、続きをどうぞ。続きを。
I couldn't bear the oppressiveness of the silhouettes surrounding me, and slowly I stuck the shovel into the mud again. I felt like I was digging my own grave. Quite possible. If I kept digging, it wouldn't matter whether there was a tattoo or not, because that man's corpse would appear eventually. It was all over. Surrounded on all sides and nowhere to go. But I just couldn't figure it out, no matter how much I thought about it. Why were they here? Was it Takano-san? There was only one person who could have made the connection between me and this place. Shit. I knew it. She deserved to die.
手が休んでますよ。
Bam! Oishi kicked me in the back, which took me by surprise, sending me flying into the mud.
ちゃっちゃと掘っちゃってくださいよ。雨の中で待たされる方の身にもなってほしいもんです。
くそ、そんなに雨が嫌なら帰ればいいだろう。
Oishi kicked some mud into my face.
口より先に手を動かしてください。
This dude is foul. I mean, I knew this man was foul and was not exactly doesn't exactly have the cleanest hands out there. But it's so wild seeing him just play dirty cop, you know?
口と手を一緒に動かすのは落語家だけ。ねえ。
The men around him didn't react, not knowing quite whether they should laugh, but when Oishi glared at them, they started mumbling out pained chuckles. Just who was this guy? I knew the world had changed after that night, but if I went even further back, didn't it start when this guy showed up? That was when our peaceful days had been taken from us. Ever since he showed up in Hinamizawa, things had been odd. Yeah, I can't deny that. Everyone stopped smiling, and the world went crazy. The ground under my feet gradually got harder and heavier. At this point, even I started to think something was odd. I hadn't buried him this deep on that night, had I? My exhaustion peaked, and I sat down on the spot.
いつまで掘ればいいんだよ。
最近の若い人は体力がありませんね。おい。
At Oishi's gesture, the men all pulled out their own sinister-looking shovels. As I watched daze, one of them grabbed my collar, dragged me out of the hole, and threw me to the ground. The rest of the men stepped into the hole I dug and started shoveling themselves. As I stared at them dumbfounded, Oishi sauntered over and squatted down to look at me directly.
前原圭一さん。あなたの趣味は雨の夜の穴掘りですかな。
Yeah, how'd you know? When I didn't respond, Oishi took one of the tin buckets they were using to bail out the muddy water, scooped up some of it, and splashed the whole thing in my face. Dude.
今日は大雨ですから、これ以上いくら濡れても全然わかりませんね。
Oishi smiled to himself, then scooped up another bucket full of muddy water.
もう一回聞きますよ。あなたの趣味は雨の夜の穴掘りですかな。
No, not exactly.
そんな趣味のやついるもんか。
Splash! Oishi hit me with another bucket full of muddy water. The pebbles in it stung.
あの穴を掘ると、私、花坂じいさんのここ掘れワンワンってのが昔から憧れでしてね。
Just like that. That's what it is, yeah. As he spoke, he ran the bucket through the muddy water again, to splash it in my face again.
あそこにどんな宝物が埋まってるんですかね。私にちょっとだけでもおし。
Dude, at this point, I feel like you're probably best off just telling him that, like, like, almost the truth, right? But basically just be like, look, something's wrong, right? Like, look, I don't know how you do this, right? Because, like, but the thing is, what other choice do you have right now? But to say, like, look, I had this, like, vivid memory of me killing someone, but that person is alive, right? And this is where they were buried, and I have to find out if they're here, right? I don't know. That's your only chance at, like, maybe somehow getting out of this, right? You're cooked either way, bro, right? The Hinamizawa Clinic thinks you're nuts, right? You're not, there's no way you can get back there, right? Like to Hinamizawa, right? The police are on you. At this point, I'm like, and like, you're not escaping this. Like, you might as well just hope the body isn't there at all and hope this was all some crazy fantasy. If you want to know, then dig on your own time, you fucking pig. I wasn't saying that out loud, but I wish you mercilessly drenched me in muddy water again anyway. Shit. If only you hadn't shown up, the world wouldn't have gone wrong. Ever since you showed up, things have been strange. Satoko got abused by her uncle. I ended up killing him, and the world went crazy. He was how it all began, because of this culprit. He splashed another bucket of mud in my face. My insides were seething with anger, dude. Okay, Oishi, at this point, what is splashing another bucket of mud gonna do? Like, die. You die too. If I have some strange power to kill someone by cursing them like with Takano-san, then you're dead. And it won't be Oyashiro-sama's curse. It'll be mine. I'll curse you and kill you.
反抗的な目つきですね。これを機に少しそのあたりをお勉強してしまいましょうか。今は平和な時代ですがね、私があなたくらいだった頃は何でも鉄拳制裁が普通でして。
おいさ。
One of the digging men in raincoats wiped some sweat off and called Oishi over. Did they find it? Oishi tossed the bucket away and then turned around with an evil grin on his face.
はいはい、何でしょうか。
これを見てください。
Acceptance, or maybe resignation. I wanted to say to them, so you blockheads finally found it. Yeah, that's right. I'm the one who killed him. But you're the police, so it's your own job to figure out who he is, right? Come on, prove to me that he's really Satoko's uncle.
何ですかこりゃ。
多分古い排水管ではないかと。あそこの用水路に繋がっているようです。
ぶっ壊しちゃいましょうか。どうせ使ってない缶でしょ。
The men all exchanged glances, then hesitantly broached another topic.
おいさ、もうかなり手応えが固いです。これより深くってことはありえないと思います。
掘る場所を間違えました。
いえ、初めのうちは明らかに掘り返す感触でした。
What the hell happened? Okay, so the body isn't there.
ですが、このくらいを掘った頃から急に硬くなりまして、多分もともと掘った穴よりも深く掘り進んだのだと思います。
じゃあつまり何ですか。ここには穴があって何もなくただそのまま埋め直されたと皆さんそうおっしゃるわけで。
What? What were they talking about?
こりゃ参ったな。ねえ前原さん。
Oishi grabbed my collar and dragged me to the huge hole they dug. The mud inside was like an ocean, and I couldn't see any drain pipe down there. One of the men stirred it with a shovel, letting me hear it clang against something hard. There was no doubt I'd buried him right here. But I hadn't buried him this deep. I didn't dig deep enough to unearth an entire drain pipe. So, then, this man, his corpse, where was it? Proof that I'd been successful on that night, was gone. Gone. Then, what on earth was I actually crazy after all? And just possessed by the delusion that I'd killed someone? That couldn't be. It was the unmistakable truth. It couldn't have been a hallucination. But now, the most important evidence that it hadn't been an illusion was gone. I killed him. I buried him. I had absolute, unwavering confidence in that fact. Then, did I fail to kill him? After I left here, had he started breathing again, crawled out, and gone back to Satoko's house? Was that it? I'd come here to see whether he had a tattoo or not, and yet the truth I unearthed was far more than that. Yesterday, what was I killed him. I buried him. There was no doubt. But for some reason he lived and crawled back out. And that was impossible too. I'm so tired of hearing the word impossible over and over. I get it. And people don't like to play by the rules here in Hinamizawa. Then I'll kill you as many times as I need to. I'll keep killing you until you never show your face to Satoko again. Oishi and the others were muttering to each other. Eventually their conversation ended, and Oishi came towards me. What did he want to say? What did he want to do? I stiffened, tensing up, and then Oishi just ignored me like I wasn't even there and passed right by me. The other men too. They ignored me and shuffled away. Eventually, there was no longer a sign that anyone was around. I returned to my quiet world of silhouettes. The only one left there was me. Only the sound of the pouring rain filled up the silence. Wow, this might have been like the worst case scenario for me actually understanding what the hell is happening. You know, like, I thought I was maybe onto something. And now I'm like, psych! Bro. Alright, let's view the tips. Inquiry request. Okonomiya Police Station Command Center Transmission Recording. June 20th, 8:08 p.m.
こちら沖宮 PS 感度良好です。
車両ナンバー紹介をお願いします。獅子骨歯の4344。
副将獅子骨歯の4344。少々お時間もらえますがよろしいですか？
お願いします。
Number match. Shishibone H4344. Owner blank blank. I'm assuming that's Teppei Hojo. Address blank Hinamizawa Village, Shishibone. Vehicle make and model blank blank. Theft reports none. Special mentions nothing of note.
沖宮 PS より大石社どうぞ。先ほどのナンバーが判明しました。大石社どうぞ。大石社応答願います。あれ？でも大石社応答願出ませんね。
大石さんが車両紹介？誰の車だよ。
村人の車ですね。至って平凡な。
何者だよ。大石さんが聞いてくるからにはただものじゃないんだろ。
突起事項欄は完全に空欄ですね。S 号指定もなし。減点もなしだし。
パッシングでもされて腹が立ったんじゃないの？あの人根に持つとなかなか忘れないタイプなんだよ。
I know a motorcycle could probably be like, you know, called a car here, but I guess maybe like there would be nothing. Well, no, there's a vehicle make and model. I think they would know if it was a motorcycle. They didn't say anything. I kind of wonder if they're actually talking about Takano's vehicle. So there's something suspicious about what the license plate, what, H4344. Okay, keep that in mind. Record of malice. Let's look at this. He said it smelled. He said the food smelled. He said it smelled because I smelled. He said I smelled because I don't take baths. He said to take a bath 3 times a day because I was a smelly person. He said I had to stay in the bath for a long time every time. He must be possessed by something too. This is the same thing the man who died said. Why does he know what that man said before? That much is obvious. The same thing that possessed that man is now possessing him. Can't a sudden earthquake make a big hole in front of the house? If it did, he would definitely go and look into it. And then I just have to push him in. I won't give in until I get that chance. I won't give in, I won't cry. I won't give in, I won't cry. Someone is apologizing again. What the hell are these tips? I actually have like no clue what these mean. I mean, I can't help but feel like this is like somehow like Satoko talking about Teppei. He must be possessed by something too. The same thing the man who died said. The same thing that possessed that man is now possessing him. So what? I don't know, to me it sounds like this is somehow Satoko, like, maybe, like, it might not be. I don't know. But it kind of sounds like Satoko, right, knows Teppei died, but then there was a replacement Teppei who said all the same things. And how did he know all of that? Whoever is speaking, I assume Satoko, but maybe not. They are saying, they seem convinced it's possession, and that the same thing that possessed the first person, again, who I assume is Teppei, is now possessing the new person, which I assume is the, like, replacement Teppei. And then the apologizing, that sounds like Hinamizawa. Okay. So this was a wild episode, and there's going to be at least one more, it would seem. Okay, this was a big one. So, the last episode somehow has been turned into, like, setup. We watched Keichi murder Teppei, but he gets to school just to find out that he was apparently at the Watanagashi last night, and on top of that, Teppei is alive, right? Which is obviously, in itself, that's just like, what? Right? That's wild, right? How is Teppei alive, right? And so, there are a few possibilities that make sense, right? One is that, I guess Teppei lived, right? We didn't kill him and he made his way out, but we kind of ruled that one out later. We'll get to that later. Two is that we killed someone else, and therefore the body would be there. Three is the possibility that it was Teppei that died, and something happened to the world itself, right? To, like, undo all of that, right? Which I'm going to be honest, right now, that's where I'm at. So, I think it's also worth noting, after we learned about Teppei, right, Keiichi was obviously acting suspicious, and Rena and Neon picked up on that, and they seem to know something, right? They seem to know some things. They got all crazy eyes, right? And they wanted to bring him to the dam site, the two of them. Keiichi was naturally very suspicious of this, so he made some excuses to get out, and he eventually landed on, I'm going to the clinic, which Rena was cool with, actually. I don't think that was a coincidence. I think the clinic is like, oh, word, whatever. That means Irie is going to deal with him. But, whatever. We go to the clinic, and on the way, we stop at the school, and this is important. Satoshi's bat is gone, right? It is missing, which indicates at least some of what happened yesterday is still correct. Now, one thing I do wonder is, what are the odds the bat is behind that vehicle, right? Like, I don't know that he checked that. I think he should have. I think he didn't think to at the time, but I think it's very possible the bat is behind that vehicle, and somehow that whole day just got undone, right? That's what I'm leaning towards right now. But either way, the bat is gone, right? And so that's like proof to Keiichi that, like, oh my god, like, this happened, right? I'm not completely delusional. He goes to the clinic and he talks to Irie, which, by the way, it turns out he's a doctor, and this is the Irie clinic, right? Which makes any potential tie to the really suspicious seeming medicine or syringe, right? It just makes it all the worse, right? All the more sus, right? Because now I'm like, oh, of course, right? The guy I was already sus of just so happens to have a clinic, which I was sus of, right? In a game where we have a mysterious drug doing something that I'm obviously sus of, right? Like, there's a point where you got too many coincidences, right? Right now, I have to assume Irie is, like, a lot more involved than he looks, especially because we tell Irie, and he goes along with everything we're saying about how we killed Teppei, and he thought he was like, yeah, no. If you did that, that man is dead. Like, there's no chance he lived. Especially because you left him there for 30 minutes while you were digging that hole. Like, if, like, he wouldn't have been able to breathe. Like, even if you somehow didn't cave his skull in, he would not have been able to breathe. Right? And so the possibility that Teppei just crawled out and wasn't dead, I think is like 0. Right? Teppei would have looked for us. Right? Teppei wouldn't have just like... I don't think he'd be cool in it. We'd already have some goons on their way to kill us, right? We'd probably already be dead, right? Like, and so that was one of the first things. I was like, there's literally no way. But we get the information from Irie that he has a tiger tattoo on his back, and Keiichi is like, we might need to go look at that, right? But before that, Irie decides to close the clinic because it's closing time. Lets some of his staff go. And Keiichi needs to pee, and so he goes out to he tries to go to the restroom, and he overhears them talking about sedating him and with that tea, right? And how they were going to have guys ready in case he got violent. And that's obviously pretty suspicious, right? Don't get me wrong. I understand in Irie's spot why he would be like, dude, this guy is nuts. He just came to me and confessed murder, which isn't even possible, right? Like, what? Like... we need to do something, right? But you gotta wonder why the first thought is to sedate him, right? They're probably like trying to bring him somewhere undisclosed, and I suspect that the people in the clinic already know where that place is. I worry that it would be a pretty bad place to be in. Yeah, I can imagine, right? So Keiichi realizes this. Oh, actually, before that, it's important to note that they walk up and say that Takano died, right, which shocked Irie. And on top of Takano's death, he was like, wow, so the curse claimed Takano and someone else, like Risa? Something like that? I'll need to end up writing that name down when I rewatch this video. It might have been Tomotake's real name, and so that's something I need to keep in mind. But he seemed genuinely shocked, so I gotta wonder if he's really behind the curse killings now. It seemed logical before, but I don't know. I still think there's something very suspicious about him. And he's probably not a good actor, but I guess there's nothing saying that there's not another faction here, right? Maybe he's not involved, or maybe he's just a great actor, right? He might just be good at acting surprised, right? Which wouldn't shock me. I mean, he acted really well when talking to Keiichi, really made him believe that he believed him and that he was listening to him, right? But, so, I think there's also the good chance he's just a very good actor, so maybe I shouldn't, like, freak out too much about that, or, I don't know. But the idea that, I don't know, I think the chance that he's not in charge of who dies from the curse, it's higher than it was before in my mind, right? It peaked, like, it surged to an all-time high, like, chance when I saw that it was called the Irie Clinic, but with that, it kind of dropped back down a little bit, right? Gotta bring it back a level, right? Because, I guess I know it could be acting, but he seemed genuinely surprised at who the curse victims were, right? And that's not to say that maybe he's not involved in some way, right? But maybe he's just involved in providing the mystery drug, and providing people that seem like absolute lunatics, because maybe he understands what is going on in Hinamizawa, right? Like, he knows what is going on in Hinamizawa, and so anyone who is starting to, like, has been affected by what's going on in Hinamizawa, maybe it's his job to bring them to the big group, right? I don't know, right? I still think he's involved either way. I don't think the chance of his involvement really dropped at all in my mind, right? But maybe he's not behind everything explicitly, right? Anyways, after all this, Keiichi runs away, and he escapes, he grabs a shovel, and he goes back to where he buried the body. He starts digging, he turns on the lantern, and he gets surrounded by police. Oops. Right? It seems they already knew where to look. How they knew that, good question. I can only imagine it was Takano. But I guess maybe Irie could have given them an idea. Depends on how in depth he went with talking about where he did it to Irie. Because he was on the phone with Oishi, right? Then they dig the area and there's no body, which is like the worst outcome, right? Because if the body was there, right, and we confirmed that Tepe was dead but still alive, it would have given us a pretty easy guess as to what was going on in Chapter 2. But instead there was no body there, right? And I guess there's the possibility that they got dug up since then, right? But like, I'm just starting to wonder if like the entire day of watching Higurashi got like reset and it didn't happen as Keichi remembered somehow, right? Almost like, actually, I'm thinking about it, it's almost like in my mind it's kind of like Steins Gate, right? So that idea that like time changed, right? What happened in that time changed, right, after the fact, and one person specifically is able to remember that, in this case Keichi. Keichi remembered what did happen, but things got reset, and what happened changed, right? And so all the events leading there, and so all the results were different, but Keiichi's memories aren't what they should be, right? And that's what I'm starting to wonder, right? I've already been kind of thinking maybe it's something with time for a bit now, but like, I don't know. That's my best guess right now. That's my best guess. I mean, I guess technically there is still just a chance that Keiichi is, like, insane, right? And was, like, the idea that he killed Tepe was, like, some crazy delusion, right? And so his memories of that day are different for that reason. And then maybe the bat is still there. Like, he did plan everything, and then the next day all ended up, like, being in his head somehow. But I don't know. I don't know. I guess I could see either of those two explanations. Still, though, I will admit, something being up with time would help explain what happened with Mion and Takano last chapter. I will admit that much. Overall, though, this episode added so much to the mystery, right? An episode that you think would maybe clear things up a little bit, right? You know, it started with more mysteries, and I'm like, okay, they might give us some general answers to some things. Nope. Nothing. Nothing. And so I'm left more unsure than ever, really. That's what's crazy about Higu. We keep getting more evidence, and every theory that I've kind of had, like, nope, shot down. Nope. Like, it can't, or at the very least, needs to be modified, right? And everything I think, like, this could probably prove it. They're like, yeah, well, too bad. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I really, really need to see where this chapter goes. I assume there's, like, I would assume 2 more chapters in this chapter at max. But we'll see. I really enjoyed this episode. Like I said, it added so much to the mystery. I've got so much to think about. I'm really looking forward to playing some more, seeing how this chapter ends, and then taking my time away, right, and just thinking about things. Seeing if anything comes to my mind, right? I don't know. But before all that, we gotta finish the chapter. So I assume that will be out 3 days after this video. I think this video is coming out on the 5th, because I think the last one should be out on the 2nd, I think. I don't know, I've kind of lost track. 2nd, 5th, probably one of those days. But I hope to see you guys there for that next episode. And for now, peace.